Well, right down here is where Mama Hayden and Daddy Hayden is buried. What I remember about my father was that he didn't talk much.
You're right.
And I remember one time that we were down here when Mama Hayden went to the Holy Land, paid for through the money that Daddy Hayden got in his inheritance from his sister Pearl, I believe. Anyhow, we were down here for 2 weeks because my son ruptured appendix while he was here. He was laid up in the hospital. Maybe it's more than 2 weeks. But anyhow, one afternoon out on the back porch, he started talking about his mother and his family. And he said he was his mother's girl child because all the rest of the kids had gotten married and moved off, and he was left home by himself with his mother. Her husband, of course, had died when Daddy Hayden was about 13 years old. But anyhow, she made him do the housework and wash the dishes and stuff. And that's why he said that he was his mama's girl child. And of course, he used to wash a lot of dishes at our house, didn't he?
He got a lot of practice with his mother.
And,
Knew how to do it.
I think he, at one point, he was the Sunday school superintendent of the Baptist church.
He was very active there.
And all of a sudden that stopped. I believe that probably stopped because of his habit with wine.
Probably.
I think maybe his wife got embarrassed, or he got embarrassed or something, but he stopped going to church, and he would stay at home and he would cook Sunday dinner.
Well, plus he stayed at home and with whoever was the baby and things like
stuff
that.
like
too.
that.
So that could have been.
When television came along, though, he would sit in there on something. When Mom was at church, he'd sit in there and watch church on TV.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he told me about that he was trying to tell me about his family, you know, and that his I'm trying to remember. Oh, well, I could say his father died when he was 13. And his father's father died when that boy was like 5 years old. So they didn't have much stuff passed down about the father's side of the family. But he said that he thought his mother, which would be Melinda Byler, he thought his mother was Scotch-Irish. Of course, that wasn't true at all. It was his grandmother that was Scotch-Irish, the Carson grandmother was Scotch-Irish. And some other misconception he had about, I think about, it had to do with the Scotch-Irish or whatever. But anyhow, he said he didn't know where his father was buried. No, he didn't. Oh, he didn't know where his mother was buried because he was overseas at the time she died.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think he knew where his father was buried either, because I didn't find it till much later, after I found out where his mother was buried. His mother died here in Newport, we believe, from the flu epidemic in 1918. And she's buried at Batesville in Pearl Hayden's lot. His sister, the twin Pearl. As I said before, her husband was kind of well off, and they had a plot there, and Pearl only had one child, and it died at a young age. So I have frequently put flowers over there on her grave because there's no survivors to do anything like that. And one time I went by there a week or so after I'd put some there, and somebody had stolen the flowers that I put there. After I got home to Missouri, I was talking to Phil Hout, who was a lawyer here in town, my age, about somebody stole Aunt Pearl's flowers, and he volunteered to get some flowers and go to Batesville and put them over there. But anyhow, and of course our grandmother is buried over there at Batesville in the same plot with the Jacksons. And just a few rows over from that, another one of Daddy Hayden's brothers, James Paul, is buried there, and James Paul married, his wife was Houston. And then another couple of rows east of that is Charles Hayden, be our cousin Charles. That would be, I guess it's one of Paul's boys.
I think, yeah.
Charles was the executor of Aunt Pearl's will. And I've been told by Dorothy up at Mountain Home, Dorothy Alley, that he was a very handsome fella, Charles was, and all the women were crazy about him. And also buried up at Batesville Cemetery is the Pearl's twin brother, Earl. And then we have some other Haydens from that river bunch buried up at,
there's a whole line of them up there.
Up at Batesville Cemetery, too.
Who's the river bunch?
What?
Who is the river bunch?
Well, I say that because they lived along the White River. Our grandfather had a brother who was the Dr. Hayden, and they lived along the river there.
Okay.
That's the ones over at the boat dock and whatever. And those people, not many of those people knew about us over here. Not many of us knew about them over there.
There wasn't a lot of communication among Haydens.
And, but I did find a few people that did know. I found one fella that Daddy Hayden used to cut hair at the Hazel Hotel. And along the back side, on the side of the hotel, there was a barber shop. And all those barbers in there, I think, whenever they weren't cutting hair, I think they went out, there was a big long hallway they could get into and go into the main part of the hotel. And I think when they didn't have any hair to cut, they would step out into that hallway and get a wine bottle and take a little slug, you know. But this old fella that I met from over there, and he said, I knew your daddy. He cut my hair a couple of times. He says he could cut hair better drunk than other barbers could sober. I think there's been mention about Daddy Hayden drinking wine. Some members of our family thought he was an alcoholic, but he wasn't. He liked to, I believe he liked to socialize.
Was it pretty much like a Saturday night thing with him?
Yeah, mostly it was.
I think it was, yeah.
Mostly it was a Saturday deal. And I think he liked to socialize with some men he knew, because I believe that at home he was kind of...
He was lonely.
Restricted to not talk about other things, and I think he was. I believe the reason, part of the reason that he didn't talk to us much, but that he was lonesome.
Mm-hmm.
And
looking back, I think of him as a lonesome person.
Yeah.
that part about it has motivated me to look up all of this stuff, and I've thought 100 times that
Well, and he had a big family to take care of, and he did the best he could for us.
I'd just like to talk to him.
He had a kind of domineering woman to put up with, and
just like to talk to him.
yeah, me too. He always used to say every time we come to visit, from the time he was 60 or something, well, I guess it's the last time you'll find me down here. He expected to die for like 30 years before he finally did.
Well, I mean, my mother, she was sort of domineering, but I always got along with her just fine, and I think, I think she was.
But I realized that about her.
Yeah, I think she was kind of happy with me because I went to college.
Well, if she hadn't encouraged me to go down to Little Rock, and I would have just floundered around Newport doing whatever. So that was a little thing that she did that I really appreciate looking back.
I found out too that she wanted to be a nurse, and her father wanted her to be a school teacher, and her father won out.
She didn't get to do either one.
Well, she did teach school.
Yeah,
a little bit.
down there in that
She
little
had
schoolhouse down there.
She had back then you could take a test, and they had different degrees of determine what level you could teach, and I think she had the second degree or whatever, or I don't know, I think it called, I forget, but I've seen her grades when she took somewhere of what scores she made on the test. Then I think she was kind of, she kind of didn't get along with her sister very good because her sister was kind of...
She did have some ruffle feathers for Lenny.
Yeah.
I don't understand what it was.
I don't know if it was jealousy or...
Lenny had that nerve problem in her head where her head jerked all the time.
Yeah.
And Mom used to think, mad at her because she
stop doing that. Yeah.
That was just something she couldn't help.
Yeah. I heard that when Lenny wanted to get married, she couldn't get married because Sebring said that Mama Hayden had to get married first.
The oldest daughter had to be married first. So.
And I think I know that her marriage to Daddy Hayden was arranged, yeah. Because I know that in Mama Hayden's later life, she used to say that she didn't love him, but she grew to love him or something like that. I think she was kind of a frustrated
she was
person herself.
Pushed by her father to be like he thought society ought to be. The oldest girl has to get married first and all that stuff. That would not fly
That
anymore.
wouldn't work today.
Yeah.
Not even close.
No. Back in those years, a lot of arranged marriages took place.
Yeah, that was not uncommon.
Yeah.
I think at the time when Daddy Hayden moved here, from Ravenden. I believe that John had, when his mother died, had been the one who kind of got control of the properties that she had, if
That's
there
what
was
I've
much.
heard, yeah.
And I believe he kind of controlled it. And I don't believe the other members of his family shared in it as much. But I think that's one of the reasons that Daddy Hayden came here, is because he had some of that property that from his mother. Also, Earl lived here
Oh, he did?
in Newport for a short time, and Earl's daughter told me that she hated it because they lived across the tracks, and it was on the south, or the other end of town, not the one that crossed over going to Jacksonport, but it's on the other end up there by the Southern Cotton Oil Mill.
Oh, yeah.
And she, I think she was a high schooler at the time, and she just hated it. There, at that time, I know we have a picture of Uncle Earl, I believe it's Uncle Earl, pushing that popcorn machine up there in town.
Yeah.
I think Daddy Hayden pushed that popcorn machine around some too. But he didn't do so well. Earl didn't, so they moved back to Batesville. And that's when he became, of course, Paul was in the candy business because he made candy, but Earl was in the candy business because he worked for some outfit and he sold Baby Ruths and all kinds of candy made like that. But Earl's son was married to, Earl's son Horace, I think was his name. He was married to a gal and then divorced, and he married again. And I think I talked to his first wife one time, not knowing the whole story, and she said that Uncle Earl was a fool. He was I can't remember the exact words. He was he's a doddering old fool or something like that. And
Maybe that was just because he wouldn't do what she said.
Yeah.
well, they were kind of big. She was like, at one time was the director of the Batesville Beauty Contest or White River Beauty Contest and all that kind of stuff. And I wrote to him one time, I think his name was Horace, and he didn't like the name Horace.
Well, who would?
So he changed his name to
There was
Howard.
a Hortense in the family too? Was it Horace and Hortense, brother or sister, or what do I remember?
I don't-
Hortense.
Hortense was a street we lived
Yeah, I
on.
know it was a street, but it seemed like I knew somebody with it.
That name?
That name.
Well, he had a cousin, Howard. Horace Howard had a cousin on the White River side of the family, whose name was Howard Hayden. And Howard Hayden's first wife was Ollie Mae Forshee. Forshee was her last name. And he divorced her, or she divorced him, and he was married again too. But that's the only time I ever run across that Ollie Mae name again. And
Not too many of them around.
I don't know. My mother always said that my father named me that probably after one of his old girlfriends.
maybe it's Ollie Mae Forshee.
Yeah. Why didn't she let him?
For the record, I've always liked that name.
Anyhow,
You can have it.
ironic part of that is I'm known in my class as Ollie
How did you get that name?
because of
Well,
Oliver and Hardy.
Oh, okay.
That's not the story I
Always,
heard.
what a fine mess you're getting.
I heard a different story.
Oh, yeah, what was your story?
Somebody that he was running around with. And I heard a story that him and two other guys went to Batesville to put Newport on a water tower. Or greyhounds or something. He was going to throw him over the fence because the gate was locked. Tiny Crabtree was telling that story. And he caused his chili.
Well, that's your brother, not me. That's your
Oh,
other
that was
brother.
Phil,
Younger
wasn't
brother?
it?
No, Chili, that's Charles.
Was that Charles?
I've never heard. Well,
Oh.
Well, his nickname was
he-
Oh,
Charles.
that does make more sense.
Chili.
Yeah.
well, I don't know. How did he get you to?
He just got the two mixed up in his old age, I guess.
I'm sure he was in the same grade with Charles.
Oh, I was under the impression that he was in the same grade with you.
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
No, I mean, I don't think he knew me really that well.
You probably didn't then.
I just ran out of stuff to say.